Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, and today I want to explore how technology can play a major role in changing the world for the better. And today's guest is Jane Mosbacher-Morris, the CEO and founder of a company called To The Market. And she's also been named on Fortune's annual Greatest Leaders list, largely down to her work activating To The Market's network of suppliers to source personal protective equipment back in March. But I want to learn about her personal story and how her team handled pivoting in the midst of a global pandemic, and also building supply chains of the future and how 2020 will make all companies and brands think differently about how they procure, source in a post-pandemic world. And most importantly of all, because this is a tech podcast, technology's role in making it a reality, especially in this increasing world of conscious consumerism too. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Atlanta so we can speak with Jane now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
My name is Jane Mosbacher-Morris, and I'm the founder and CEO of To The Market, which is a company that is connecting ethically made products to businesses and consumers from around the world. And I'm also the author of Buy the Change You Want to See, Use Your Purchasing Power to Make the World a Better Place, which is a Penguin Random House book about conscious consumerism.
I'm quite excited to delve into that subject. And it's something that we all need right now, I think. And
Yes.
that To The Market, as you said there, you're using technology to help retailers and brands provide transparency in the supply chain to source and manufacture products that are socially and environmentally responsible, but at competitive prices, lower minimums, and faster turnaround. So it sounds like win-win-win. But can you tell me more about the mission at the company?
Sure. So one of the things that I was really surprised about when I began to learn more about the retail sector was just how opaque and just how challenged the sector was, not only socially and environmentally, but also operationally. I mean, I made a joke when I was doing an interview on Bloomberg that I have more transparency into the production of my pizza, meaning it's going in the oven, it's being quality controlled, it's out for delivery, than oftentimes buyers who are placing multi-million-dollar orders with suppliers have in the production of their product. And so looking at all of these operational challenges, the opaqueness, the brokenness of the social and environmental footprint of this industry really inspired me to think about what I could do to make it more transparent, to make it more efficient, and to make it more ethical.
I love that pizza example there. And I'll be honest with you, something I'd not thought of until you said it. And as soon as you did, I almost felt the penny drop. And I thought, man. But I mean, I've got to ask, can you remember what first inspired you to use technology to make this positive impact on the world by using technology?
Well, I think technology gives us the ability to have transparency that not using tech, obviously, it cannot provide cannot provide as efficiently. And retail and retail manufacturing in general really is very outdated in the type of systems that they use. So for example, you can still receive, again, multi-million-dollar orders with an Excel spreadsheet that's outlining what products that they're interested in, the turnaround time, delivery information, et cetera. And then folks typically rely on things like email to say, hey, Neil, we're running on time for production, we're running on time for delivery, et cetera. And so I really wanted to help bring technology to a sector that I think was suffering because it was so opaque. And through technology, I felt like it gave visibility for clients, but it also gave a voice to our suppliers because it allowed them to be more connected to the buyers that were sourcing from them. Because typically suppliers, the United States in particular, we have really shifted our reliance on manufacturing to overseas operators. And the way that the shift happened is that most procurement happened through brokers. And so as a buyer, traditionally, I didn't really understand who my supplier was. So I didn't know who was making my product and how it was being made. And as a supplier, I often had no idea even who I was making for until potentially I was looking at tagging and shipping information. And so it's through technology that you're able to really bridge that gap between a maker who may be, in a challenging neighborhood in Calcutta and a buyer who's, sitting in Minneapolis or in New York.
And you recently appeared on Fortune's annual Greatest Leaders list because of your work activating TTM's network of suppliers to source PPE in early March. But can you tell me more about how I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you've already shipped over 1.2 million ethically manufactured units to hospitals throughout the United States. But can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. And at this point, that was 1.2 million at, I think, publication date, which was, in April. And now it's actually over 3 million units. In mid-March, when it became clear that the United States was facing a PPE, so personal protective equipment shortage, my team realized that we had suppliers all over the world. So we're in over 30 countries at this point. We have hundreds of vetted and approved suppliers, those that are operating in a way that's better for people and better for the planet. And we realized that we had both these suppliers and expertise importing product. And we thought, gosh, what if our suppliers could be helpful in creating this PPE product that is in such shortage for United States hospital systems? And so we reached out to our suppliers through our RFP, request for proposals platform, with specifications for the type of product that we felt comfortable that we could produce, which was cut and sew masks and gowns, because that was within the expertise of our existing suppliers. And then we started actively pitching this product to hospital systems. And thankfully, we're really able to not only provide critical PPE to these US-based hospital systems, but also to continue to drive economic opportunity to these suppliers who oftentimes, in cases like this where retail really shuts down, are not included in the production process. So it was a win-win for sure.
I find it quite inspiring how you've managed to grow a network of more than 100 suppliers in over 20 countries, including the US, of course. But can you tell me a little bit more about the technology that enabled you to, or at least helped you to do all that and collaborate with suppliers all over the world?
Well, when you're working in different time zones and you're working with different languages, providing ways for people to engage with you in a semi sort of easy to use, I don't want to say low tech, but I would say, tech that is accessible to all. So regardless of the bandwidth that a community might have, or access to, high-speed internet, or, what kind of laptop versus a smartphone, we are really focused on building platforms that allow for a supplier to, for example, be able to respond to a text message that says, yes, we're running on time for production. Here's a snapshot that I've taken of the product with my phone, and that be uploaded into the system, rather than, again, traditionally you have folks are going back and forth on email, or they're having to get on the phone and talk to a buyer. And that can be really challenging for some of these suppliers who are in less sort of tech developed communities. And so providing sort of seamless access through a smartphone and through very easy questions that we've developed has made it easier for us and more efficient to capture some of this information.
And you've enjoyed fantastic success, but I'm conscious that I don't want to make it sound incredibly easy, because I would imagine that it's not just a walk in the park. So, I mean, can you share how your team were almost having to force into handling how to pivot as an organization as well?
Well, I think that, pivoting is always something that entrepreneurs should be ready to do, based on market dynamics. And I think one of the decisions that we made early on that allowed us to pivot so seamlessly was that we wanted to be asset light, meaning that as a business that sources and manufactures ethically made goods, we actually don't hold any inventory. And so that then frees us to make decisions about what product is in need, what's in demand, versus if we were sitting on inventory, we have to find a way to move that product. And it can be, hard to then justify pivoting away from the movement, trying to sell those original goods that you produced. And so being asset light, and then, having a system that allows for you to reach out to your suppliers for different types of products just allowed for us to make that pivot pretty quickly, because our suppliers were used to seeing different types of requests for proposals come over the bow. And they were also, getting information from us that was really clear, meaning that there was trust that this was a real opportunity that they could participate in. And so they moved quickly because they had trust in us that we were bringing them a real opportunity. And so the entire value chain became aligned. We were moving quickly. Our hospital systems had demand, which was immediate. And then our suppliers were moving quickly because they were economically incentivized, and they also trusted us that this was an opportunity that they would be compensated for fairly, and that we were good partners to them.
And I completely agree with you there on how organizations should all know how to handle pivoting. And I'm curious, do you think that companies are starting to think differently now about how they procure and source? And do you see any early signs of a new supply chain for the future enabled by technology?
I think something that COVID has made very clear is two primary pieces. One is that having a supply chain that is overly reliant on a single factory or even a single country is very risky, because if we are in a dynamic like we faced with COVID, where you have, health related shutdowns, or it could be geopolitical related shutdowns, or massive changes in customs and duties, it is helpful if you have a backup to your primary factory and a backup to your backup. And I recommend to our clients that they are geographically diverse, as well as having multiple facilities from which they're sourcing. So the need for a syndicated supply chain, I think, is more and more critical, and has become more clearly critical sort of during COVID. I would not say post-COVID, because I think we're still so much in it. The second piece is that I think when there is a crisis, which I think the globe has faced in a way that possibly we haven't collectively faced since there's been a world war, is that people begin to ask themselves, both personally and professionally, what am I doing with myself? What am I doing with my life? What is driving my choices? What do I care about at the end of the day? And I think that type of reflection leads people to then say, how do I better leverage the work that I'm doing in my business to be more aligned with my values? And that certainly then trickles into procurement. And this is the sort of thesis of Buy the Change You Want to See, my book, which is that everybody, every single human being, regardless of your budget, has the opportunity to make change if you align your purchasing power with your values.
I'm so glad you mentioned your book there, because as from a consumer point of view, I think we're all much more socially aware and aware of our personal responsibility and social impacts of every purchase and every brand that we do business with. So on that note, can you tell me a little bit more about your book, Buy the Change You Want to See, and how to use your purchasing power to make the world a better place? I think it's fantastic what you've done here.
Thank you. Well, my hope with the book is that I wanted to try to make it easy and practical for people to find ways to be a part of the conscious consumerism movement. And one of the biggest things that I wanted to dispel was this idea that conscious consumerism is only for the affluent or only for a specific sort of political part of the spectrum. And I wanted to provide very practical ways that people with all types of spending power, people in all parts of the world, in different professions, could be a part of advancing their values through their purchasing power. So we talk about different categories that are very common for us as both businesses and as individuals to spend money on. So sometimes it's hyper-specific like coffee or chocolate. Sometimes it's broader like gifts. And it provides examples of businesses that are doing really interesting things that people can be supportive of. But it also speaks to, why, for example, a industry like coffee is perhaps the most transparent commodity in the world, and why, and sort of what the history is of how this good is an example of where I think other goods will go as it relates to providing opportunity to small batch makers, having consumers feel connected to the growers, so the makers, and us as sort of a public being more educated about this product that, even 20 years ago, we were happy with, in America, something like a Folgers, something super, super basic. And now I would say it's very common for people to have very specific tastes around coffee, almost like they're drinking wine. And that's really because of the investment that's been made to make it more transparent, the whole supply chain more transparent.
And conscious consumerism is such a huge thing at the moment, and that can only be a great thing. And I'm curious, have you had a chance to get much feedback from the book? Has it attracted a lot of attention for the right reasons as well?
I think it's been a great way for people to learn more about what we're trying to do to the market. Yeah. So I think it's been very, very helpful in people understanding the thesis of the business. I think in the United States, it did very well. It was a bestseller at Target. It was in Barnes & Noble. It was #1 consumer guide on Amazon. So I think very positive feedback. But of course, I believe it's only been out for, I guess at this point, just over a year. And I feel like it's timeless. And I feel like I'm just getting started and sort of helping to promote it.
And I love what you're doing there. I also love how your company got involved in coordinating the production of that much needed PPE by leveraging technology, but more than anything, because you thought it was the right thing to do. But what advice would you offer to any business leader listening that wants to also make a difference in a similar way?
I would say for those who are in existing roles, to ask yourself, what can you do within your existing role to help advance your values? And that could be on the procurement side. So saying, okay, I, as a business person, have made, our organization continues to make statements about the importance of women's empowerment. What do my procurement contracts look like? What is the percentage of business that I'm driving, for example, to women-owned and operated businesses? So really just looking at what is sort of in your realm of influence and control, and thinking about how you can make even tweaks to provide an opportunity to channel that purchasing power in a way that is more impactful and more aligned with your values. As a individual who may be thinking about starting a new organization, I would say that social good is critical to any business that is being started, but that still the fundamentals of the business have to be really, really solid. meaning that the basic economics have to be compelling regardless of the social mission. The social mission cannot carry a business alone.
And for anyone listening who would like to find out more information about that book, the great work you're doing at To The Market, or even carry on the conversation that we started today, what's the best way of doing that?
You can find the book online. If you look on independent sellers, you can find local booksellers that have the book. Certainly the big chains continue to carry the book. So Target, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, the book is certainly available there. And then if you're interested in learning more about To The Market, we're at tothemarket.com. And certainly you can follow along our journey online. We are at Let's Go TTM on social media.
Fantastic. Well, I think one of the subjects that we didn't tackle in our conversation here was how many brands over the last few months, and many of those big household names, actually upset consumers with their actions. And at a time where consumers felt that they needed these brands more than ever, whether that be employment or whether that be providing solutions rather than additional problems, they're now falling. I think people won't forget that, and they're looking to companies that help them and help educate them. And like you say in your book there, buy the change that you want to see and be a part of that solution, which is exactly what you're doing. So I think you're going to be in for an incredibly successful year. I'd love to stay in touch with you and get you back on towards the end of the year and see how things are taking shape. But more than anything, just a big thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Neil. I really appreciate it.
To The Market uses technology to help create transparent supply chains for both retailers and brands all over the world, and enabling them to source and manufacture socially and environmentally responsible products at competitive prices, lower minimums and faster turnaround times. What is not to like about that is positive change right across the board. And I love how they've built this growing network of more than 100 suppliers in 20 different countries around the world. But you know, the one thing that I keep thinking about from that conversation is Jane's comments about ordering a pizza, because we do get that nice little graphic telling you every single stage of the pizza making process, from the ordering, who is cooking the pizza, who's going to deliver it. But in every other element of our life, we know nothing about the supply chain or who's handling anything. But the big point here is we all want to know, because conscious consumerism means if your brand is making products in a sweatshop using child labour, we want to know and we won't buy it. And that is the fundamental change here. But that's just me thinking out loud. Let me put the microphone over to you, because I'm sure you've got even more to say on this topic. And if you have, I invite you to email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, or pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. So I'm incredibly interested in what you're going to have to say about this and what your views are. Keep them coming across. And I'll return again tomorrow with another conversation about how technology is transforming our world. So all that's left for me to say is a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.